I have made it like pretty clear multiple times on this channel that The Planet of the Apes and The How to Train a Dragon are two of my favorite trilogies of all time. And upon the release of the new remake for the How to Train a Dragon film, yes, I know, another remake of our beloved animated show, but possibly we cannot go over 3 this year. Like, come on. But I admit that the absolute discredit I have been seeing to my fave, like on Twitter, for example. Like, what do you mean you take Kung Fu Panda over this? So I watched the 3 major films of the How to Train a Dragon trilogy to tell him what my opinion and why I love them and why they are the best things ever. Obviously, starting with the first one. How to Train a Dragon 1 is simply a hiccup story, and I'll get to all the other characters in a second. Nobody really had much to do for this film outside of Hiccup, and maybe you could add Toothless to the mix. And as strange as that sounds, I absolutely loved it. It does come out to its detriment towards the end, but here's where that praise goes, because obviously across the 3 films, we do get to see Hiccup grow. Like in every movie, we get a little bit of a jump to see Hiccup grow, but really nothing as compared to on here. He is basically not what his father wants him to be, and he says that to him clearly on here.
When you carry this axe, you carry all of us with you, which means you walk like us, you talk like us, you think like us. No more of this.
And at the start, we do see him to try to kill Toothless to prove that he is more than that scrawny chief's son, until he learns that these dragons are not that tough after all. And I just like how his bond with Hiccup grows. And as we see that, we also learn about the dragons, what they are afraid of, and how Hiccup uses that to excel in his trials. It also shows at the end of the movie with the big fight. The whole Hiccup and Toothless man and best friend bond is probably the best man and beast relationship I have seen on screen to make what is in this film, this franchise, unquote, the king of beasts, this adorable goofball that we love across these 3 films. And we see like Hiccup do everything to protect his friend. Even Toothless, we see everything to protect his friend, even in the detriment of himself. And as I mentioned, it's more of a Hiccup story, and yes, there are stuff with his dad, but he is gone for like half of the runtime. But I'll talk about him in more in the sequel. But just feels, considering that this was such a Hiccup film, they could have done more with their dynamic, especially considering this movie does not even have an antagonist. And it comes to my main issue, which is it doesn't really have much to do outside of Hiccup and Toothless. Yes, as I mentioned, we get that whole father and son arc. But for me, I don't think enough was shown at the start to show for it. Like, all we got was maybe at the start, we saw like when they were both mad at each other. And one scene at the end where I did love, don't get me wrong, as he comes back from his like voyage to kill the dragon den or whatever. He wants to tell Hiccup that he's proud of him and everything for like passing the trials, but due to their weird relationship and the way they grew up, there is this disconnection in their relationship. And it's cool to see it on there. I can see like how that can be relatable to a ton of people, a ton of sons and their fathers growing up not really being what their dad wanted. And when like they get to be happy with what you're doing and the dad like wants to start bonding with them, there's usually that disconnect that like it's a bit hard for me to like, you know, connect with you, even though the dad is like trying to make up for lost time. And I really love that. Film also is slightly longer than I thought it would be. I did not feel the length, don't get me wrong. Out of all these 3 films, they just blasted by. But looking at the runtime for this one in particular, it was in that era that most films, especially like the first film, were like maybe 90 minutes, maybe a bit less than 90 minutes. So this film had that extra 10 minutes ish. I just wish for that extra time it did more. But overall, I really love this film. I think it's good, but the only problem that I have with it was what I mentioned, is that it just prevents this film from being like a world-class film. Maybe it's just me growing out of the film a bit, because I can't lie, a lot of the film comes off a bit no, not this one. I think it's more of the second one that suffers from that. Yeah, this film has a lot of that coming of age formula, which is not a bad thing. It just doesn't feel like the world beater that I remembered it being when I was younger.
Stop being so stoic.
And spoiler alert, his mom is still alive, which creates a problem for me for that first film, because the whole lore of this film is that the dragons killed her, which could have worked for Stoic's distaste of the dragons in the first film, especially considering how we saw Valka, she was an advocate for keeping the dragons alive. Like what Hiccup did in part 1, it seemed like they were going to hint towards that in that first film, but I don't know, I don't think they planned it well. And that also goes with the death of Stoic, which did not hit for me on the rewatch. It felt like it just kind of happened. Like, I love the inclusion of the mom and everything, and I think her rendition is perfect in this. I think it fits in completely well with what this movie is trying to say. And the few moments we got with all three of them is probably the best scenes in this entire franchise. The emotional scenes we get, amazing. And I just wish we had that throughout this entire film. Like, this line from Stoic is probably my favorite line in like all films combined.
Thank Odin you didn't listen to me, son.
And I will talk more about the dad in the hidden world, but it also comes to the antagonist, which was just really shit in this film, which was a shame because Jimon Honsu voices him, and he is supposed to be this like badass dragon tamer or dragon like controller or whatever, but he just never reflects that. I feel like the movie tries so much to tease him to be this big bad throughout the film, but the grand reveal, it just comes out of being flat, and it's just a kids film being a kids film, and it doesn't pay off for me, at least. Like the final confrontation, he just lets Hiccup talk sense to Toothless with no fight back. And it's just things like that that destroy the movie because it just feels lazy. I still think this movie, as well as all the other films, just shines on that one thing, which is Hiccup's development. I feel like they never miss with it. But I would put my hands up and admit that this is probably the worst implementation of it. I think that's the better way of putting it. Because they make him somewhat naive.
And if I could change your mind, I can change his too.
Man, what the fuck is you talking about?
What the fuck was that?
I'm sorry, man. I wasn't thinking about it.
His entire plan is to make Dark Blood like love dragons or something. Like, it doesn't make sense. You want him to change his mind. I can see that being an aspect for his growth, but be for real, like, it's not gonna work like that. It's not gonna happen like that. It doesn't even happen like that at the end. And if I really want to go to nitpick the crevice of this film, how can Drago fly Toothless with ease? I thought the entire point of the Toothless Hiccup relationship was built on the fact that Toothless was a dragon that only Hiccup could fly because of his wing problem, and the fact that Hiccup fixed Toothless's like flying problem to best suit him with the way he flies with Hiccup, with the way he flies with Toothless. These names are confusing, I can't lie. So that just felt weird. And also, how is Drago black? Yep, I got you, you weirdo. You know yourself. But yeah, as I mentioned, Hiccup from the start of this film, I'm a fan from the jump. The best thing about these films is the way that it built on him in a positive way. And a problem I had with the first film were the characters. If you notice, I didn't talk about them on that film because there's really nothing much to talk about. Like Astrid, I hate how in that movie there was barely any interaction between her and Hiccup, and all of a sudden she's the love interest towards the end. But here I feel like they build up from what that first film jumped to, and I think they're cute together. Stoic even says the thing,
That's my future daughter-in-law.
which I thought was nice. As well as the gang, they actually got something to do on this film compared to the first one. Not much, but something at least. I like the back and forth between Snotlog and Fishlegs for Roughnot. The state of them names, oh my days. And also the addition of Eret, played by Kit Harington, which was also nice. It also circles with the whole Roughnot triangle thing. One thing I also love about this film is the foreshadowing. Not even this film, the two films, is the foreshadowing at the end. Like how the first film, Toothless finds out that dragons aren't fireproof on the inside, and how that's how he kills that big one. And on here, it's when they talk about like the baby dragons and how they don't listen to anybody, and they use that to get back to Toothless. I think it's a really nice touch. But I have to say, this is one of my least favorites out of the three, just barely though, which I found really disappointing. Because like, when it comes to sequels, we all know DreamWorks, they're always out on their bag for sequels. Look at Shrek 2, look at Panda 2, look at I can't really think of one right now. But that's usually like that's their staple. They make really, really good sequels, better than the originals. So the fact that this didn't reach up to that standard is just a shame. But somehow they broke their curse and they hit that third film out of the park, which is bizarre, but I ain't complaining.
Do I say Chief Hiccup? Or do I call you Hiccup?
And yes, How to Train a Dragon, The Hidden World is surprisingly my favorite. Like, obviously the main reason being like the third installment course, as I mentioned, DreamWorks films always have that bad third film. Maybe outside of like Madagascar, because I love Most Wanted. That was probably, maybe it's just nostalgia. And obviously the surprising factor, which is the fact that this was the only film I watched in the cinema, and I disliked it back then. But upon my first rewatch for this a couple years back, and also my rewatch for this now, it's clear to me that this is probably one of the better parts of this film, because I think it takes every good thing about each film and just improves on that, starting with one of the better parts of this film, which is its antagonist with Gremmo. Unlike Drago and that unnecessary build-up they introduced him pretty early on, that made him way more tenacious, more of an actual threat, and quite formidable. He even gets like feats in this. He outsmarts them quite a bit, him and like between him and Hiccup. He outsmarts Hiccup quite a lot. And I did love the back and forth between both of them. The rivalry between the two was really done well. And it was the best we've got in the franchise. He still had his goofball moments, do not get me wrong. Like, I feel like I'll talk about this more towards the end, but like, this is a kid's film. These are all kids' films at the end of the day. But like, it's not a film that me personally, I think children will appreciate. I feel like it's a film that maybe when you're younger, you watch it and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. But the older you get, you watch it and you appreciate it. It's too scared to be. Don't get me wrong. I feel like 2 really dives deep in that emotional build up. I feel like 2 is probably 2 and 3 are probably one of the more emotional films. But I feel like it's too scared to go too far into that side, which I get. It's a kid's film at the end of the day, but it's a bit of a shame because I feel like these films can be better than what they are if they just take it a step further. But yeah, as I was saying, like, Grimo still has his goofball moments. Like, he comes off as cartoonish a lot of the time, but more towards his motivation. I was thinking midway in the movie that if they switch Drago's end goal with that of Grimo, he could have been a better villain. Like, Drago's whole backstory is how, like, he got hurt by a dragon. He lost his entire arm by a dragon, and he wants revenge by forcing them to listen to him with the alpha, and he wants to like take over the world or whatever, which I feel the second part works better with Grimo's whole schmiff being that he's exactly like the opposite of Hiccup. He was a scrawny young boy when he grew up in his clan or community, but instead he killed a Night Fury, which Hiccup didn't do, as you remember in the first film, and that drives Grimo to want to kill all dragons. Like, his end goal would have been better or cooler if, he wanted to control all dragons for his personal evil vendetta. Maybe he wanted to control the world like how Drago wanted to do, and like, how Hiccup wants to like free all the dragons and like make all of us live in one unity. I feel like that dynamic, that good versus evil, would have been a better like match against each other than him just wanting to kill the dragons, but I understand like that idea was already used in the second film and they probably didn't want to repeat it. But I feel like if they planned the 2 films back to back ahead, they could have swapped their end goals. I feel like that would have been like more compelling. And this film takes the biggest character leaps in my opinion. Like, as usual with Hiccup, just straight aura oozing from everything he does. He just loves to aura farm, and I think this is the best story arc we got from him out of all of them. We see him try and grow to be that leader like his father. He makes mistakes, which is nice, and I like the fact that he is pretty flawed. Don't get me wrong, he's flawed in some of the other movies, but like here completely, he learns from his flaws and he builds from it. And it's also him juggling that with losing his best friend in the process, which is like, Toothless to this other Night Fury, among other things. And there are the flashback scenes with his dad that I wanted to add, that I feel like his dad's death might have been better done at the start of this movie. Maybe Grimo killed him at the start when like he burnt his house or something. I think that would have been a better implementation of the father's death. But I understand that might have been adding too much into this movie. And also, like, Astrid and Hiccup's relationship was definitely at its best in this film because they never really had a ton of alone time interactions in the previous films, even in the second film that built on that. But here we get to see more of them have their time to shine and be that power couple. And the other characters in this finally got stuff to do, which was good, like Ruffnut's subplots, along with her brother and Snotlot's trying to teach Hiccup how to be a good husband and how to be a good leader. I think that was also really, really cool. I never even talked about this, but the animation took a huge jump in this second film. In this third film. And I feel like in each film, like, that's the thing that I love about this franchise. In each film, not only are you going to jump with Hiccup, you're also jumping like with animation. I'm not really a fan as to how the first 2 looked quite grubby, but this film is so colorful and so vibrant. Like, even when even when Toothless is drawing on the sand, like the difference between that scene and the scene in the first film, it's just mind-boggling. I love it. But The Hidden World just had the best plot for me, with the accepting responsibility, letting go of those closest to you for their next journey. It was probably just the best way that they could have ended the trilogy, in my opinion, by giving us everything we deserved or what some of the other films lacked. Overall, after watching How to Train Your Dragon, I have to admit, I might have overrated them for myself because they're still good films. Do not get me wrong, they have a lot of heart, but I feel like the problem I have with these films, it's the rewatchability. Like, for example, I knew his dad was going to die in the second film and it just didn't hit that hard on this rewatch. I think it's definitely something that, like, maybe if you've watched like 5 years ago and you're coming back to it, you will enjoy. It doesn't improve maybe like on a year or two, or maybe it's just a me thing at the end of the day. But like, it just didn't hit the same. I think its enjoyment dies the more time you watch it, especially for that second movie. But hey, I don't really care. I grew up on these. They are such a beautiful collection of chapters in the story of Hiccup, as we see him grow from this scrawny boy to this man that took his clan from like basically 2 evolutions. And every time I imagine this journey of these films, like what they took me through, I still remember amidst all of what I said, why these 3 films, regardless of their flaws, are still my favorites. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope I'll see you next time. Peace.